It does take time.
But no, I'm happy. I met with Leilani, the social worker from the police department today. Good girl. Yeah, she's amazing. She's amazing.
Are you doing the traffic commission
I don't
now?
understand how.
Okay, good. Because I got an email for
Oh, and I didn't get one. So we'll make sure that.
that changes.
No, Jeff.
Just gonna ask. Guess I better.
Hey, Chief.
Were the doors locked downstairs still?
No. No, it ought to be unlocked.
It's not. I just unlocked it. All right,
All right.
came in with my...
Chief, nice to see you.
Hi, yeah. I had, hold on.
Hey, Chief.
I had,
That's good.
Nice weather, you can't complain about it.
What
Oh,
happened?
no.
I can't stand this. Just trying to get this.
I know. Normally bring extras to the table. Does anybody else want an agenda?
Halsey.
Janet?
Yeah, I'll take one, because who knows if this.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Pues, and antes que se me olvide, I normally say Papa, but no. So if ya you first say, let me know. Pues mira, se me pagó la porquería esta. Resolution number 13, at community planning. I gotta get used to all this all over again because everything changed, the names and everything.
Just so you're aware, I'm gonna go over a little bit more than just the two words.
Okay.
So we can all go over our overall year in review.
Okay. Sweet. Very good. I'm interested. Met with Leilani today.
Okay. Yeah.
She actually in the middle of the meeting got a call from an officer and like asked her to come.
Yeah.
Really excited.
Yeah.
But I'm excited.
It's kind of neat to have that, she was out Friday on a mental health issue.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's
we-
what we were dealing with. Well, what she was dealing with today.
Yeah.
And then helping them transition into like an intake process.
¿Qué es lo que pasó con el
So I thought
cinema?
that kind of one handoff kind of mentality was like.
Well, the city hall
I
used
think
to
she
be
helped them
before.
on Friday was.
City council used to be before.
Office of the Aging.
Southern Market,
Yeah.
Southern Market.
That person
Building.
over to the Office of the Aging for follow-up and all that stuff, so.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Which,
She's.
you know, my officers don't have that. That capacity,
Yeah,
that
not the
bandwidth.
capacity, but also like, that's not the expectation.
I have
Right.
no idea.
Right.
So it's nice to have that individual. Do you find that like, she is like at capacity already?
Here, hold on a second.
I think she's
Take
gonna
this
get
one.
close. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, she'll go over some numbers tonight,
Exactly.
you know, that we have just from September.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the other thing too is, we're trying to get a,
So,
Chris mentioned,
how's finance?
counsel or a
Good.
caseworker back.
But I don't have
We used to have one working.
Pouring over spreadsheets.
Afternoons and evenings.
Are you understanding?
I hate to say that I
You're
love it,
talking
yeah.
about like an outside
Yes.
individual though?
Yes.
Or like within the department?
Outside individual, but they work out of our lobby.
Yep.
Next to the operator.
That's great.
So that person transitioned into different employment.
Okay.
So they haven't replaced that person
Okay.
yet, so we're having a conversation.
Hello.
And through the county?
Yeah.
Let's see if it lets me open this
Yep.
one.
That's,
Which has been very helpful because
17,
actually,
17.
the last 3 individuals we've had, they've also gone out and rode along with the
Hey.
officers.
so let me know if you send that.
Yeah. Yep.
Ernie, I just opened
I'll
this
get
one.
Sergeant Moran.
So here's what's gonna happen.
That'd be amazing.
See how it stays? So I'm
I
waiting
would
for it to
suggest
load up.
late afternoon.
And after a while, it just vanishes.
Like, as long as, I mean, imagine you all.
Unless you hit that.
Unless I hit this button right here.
Right.
I feel like we're kind of just like.
There's more going on in the evening.
And like everybody's
Lot of-
ready for
A lot
information.
of time during the day is, especially once the MDJ's open, is court time, which is
Everyone's.
I mean, I'll keep on doing it till I have a problem.
So,
I talked to Jess. I talked to Jess.
I don't want to be.
Yeah, and he
Yeah.
said,
You told us that it's not.
No, but that's like a great idea. So it's been 2 years since the presidential person has been there?
let's see. So
it's actually longer than that. We started back with a gentleman called Dave, his name's Dave Plummer.
Right, that's what I meant.
He worked for County Crisis Intervention for
Well, at the time.
Over there, or is it okay if I sit?
Oh, you can sit anywhere you want to.
25 years.
Yeah, so I wanted
Why you get upset with
to.
Oh, no, no, no.
No,
That's
because
okay.
I was trying to like send.
And if you prefer to sit over there, you can sit over there too.
I think I can hear better over here with my
I think they
old
want to have a meeting with us just for
Well,
us to
no,
reinforce
I'm
that
good.
it's
So,
it's necessary.
but I'm excited to move.
They wanna hear you say it.
Speaker, you know,
Okay.
like trying to nudge it in that direction.
They do it.
So,
Complete
just so you know.
Okay.
Such a
Thank you.
benefit.
Yep,
Yeah, to everyone.
thank you, that's what I should be saying.
Good.
Nothing else?
I imagine she's also like collecting data, right?
We're actually trying to find I think we found one, it's called Therapy Notes.
Okay.
Just basically software that you can
Yeah.
put things in
Keep
and
track.
track for yourself.
Kind of like case managed.
Yep. Yeah, we don't have to worry about the HIPAA information that she's collecting, that is viewable to others.
Well, you just want to.
Right.
I think too, like one thing that I noticed today is.
So everything's
so
been
she was on
involved
the phone
for the market,
for,
deals for the market.
15 minutes.
It's all late. They've got a redevelopment
So like even
plan
that
they've
is
got to
helpful.
do.
Help.
The reason why it's being run on the agenda tonight is that they're doing. And they decided
These
that
people are
there's not going to do
actively
it twice.
So like 15 minutes goes with a lot.
Oh, okay.
So I also thought that. The police officer is like waiting for her to like provide the support. So he's like on the front line, probably trying to like calm someone down.
Previously, we've done like a license transfer.
What's up?
It's her skill set that's needed there, but she's on the.
So they decided because we have to do it all in public. I don't know what the change is.
Well, who are the new owners of the
Willow Valley Communities.
You've got a community and they've already proposed a development plan and everything? And that's to come to council?
Everybody wants everything.
I know, because the planning commission.
But didn't the council have to authorize the sale of the building?
Yeah, we did. It was accepted 2 years ago. Well, actually, what we did was we transferred it to the redevelopment.
Oh, that's right, that's right, that's right.
Actually,
That's right.
mine would have been a lot nicer. Fire chief was gonna use it to cut it up.
It's been a while.
That's right, we do.
Wait, what happened?
Hi, Mayor.
So you might have parked in a spot that belongs to public safety vehicles. Jaws delayed practice.
Oh, great.
So ridiculous.
So like, where is our spot? Because I like went in that garage and I don't know what their spot is. It's not marked. Do you know what our spot is?
Yeah, well, at this hour, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
During the day.
It's the one, not the one that's closest to the door, which is the mayor's, but the one that's just beyond that.
Okay. Maybe we should put like a little C.
Well, they used to have it marked, and then for security, they decided that was a bad idea.
Okay. It's actually just like a
Okay.
But there's only one spot now.
There's one,
Yeah.
too, yeah, there's only one that's designated for council.
I think it will be.
Because that's the one I like to use when it's available, and I come in during the day to do this.
Yeah.
It's like I said, first come, first served.
Park in public. It's fine.
I've been pretty lucky at like finding street parking.
Yeah, I've never had a problem.
Yeah.
I've never had a problem.
I think I don't know what else. I usually just park in the spot, like, there's some parking down here. Nope.
Sure.
I mean, there was.
Yeah, just on.
Does anybody here need voter registration forms to hand out? I have some in Spanish and in English.
I have just someone, so thank you.
Yep. You got new eyes?
Just one.
How is it?
Great.
Good.
I see colors now that I never saw before. Or should I say,
It's a whole new world.
I'm seeing colors I haven't seen in a long time. Let me put it to you that way. Morning, sir. Good.
Good evening, all.
Hello.
Schmidt?
Hey,
Good to see you, sir.
good to see you.
This is just so you know. Next week is my second surgery.
Okay.
This won't be, I won't be here Tuesday.
No, okay. I just wanted to know.
But I should be back by the end of the month. Maybe.
Okay. All right. Good. Yeah. It was first off. Jared, it was not entirely clear to me whether the word do a little bit of your overview.
Yeah, sure. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Hey, Ben. Good, how are you?
We'll all be here till like 11 o'clock.
Hey, Joe.
My son had one longer. No Facebook?
I'm not sure. Mr. Harris, did we hear anything from Counselor Crick?
I've not heard anything else.
Okay. Well, that's not like her. I assume she's just running late. It's just making that crackling noise. Just a second. Okay.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the March 2nd, 2020 meeting of council committees. I have 6 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We've got a long agenda. Please bear with. We'll try to move as quickly as possible. But before we do that, just wanted to, by way of letting everybody know, hold on, I'll read from it directly. On March 10th, as a part of the, or really as a section in the regular meeting of council, we will have a public hearing regarding the economic development liquor license application applied for by Willow Valley Communities to reside at Southern Market Center as a part of that project. We're required to do a public hearing, and so this is my opportunity to let council and the assembled public know, should that be of interest to you. It will be part of our agenda, not totally unlike the public zoning hearing we did at the previous meeting. And with that, Mr. Harris, would you call the roll of members?
Oh, I will do that, Mr. President. Mr. Royal.
Aye.
Ms. Bacon.
Here.
Ms. Gray. Ms. Diaz.
Here.
Mr. Garcia Molina.
Here.
Mr. Soto.
Present.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
And President Smith-Waddell.
Here. Thank you, Mr. Harris. All right, approval of the February 3rd, 2020 meeting minutes.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Council comments from the public? Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Royal.
Aye.
Ms. Bacon.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
Aye.
Mr. Garcia Molina.
Aye.
Mr. Soto.
Aye.
And President Smith-Waddell.
Aye. All right, we'll move to the Personnel Committee of Council. Councilor Diaz.
Yes, I have John Lefevre nominated for appointment to the Historical
Commission and Historical Architectural Review Board. I'm not sure if he is here.
He's here.
There you are. Do we have any questions for Mr. Lefevre?
If I can, Council. So Mr. Lefevre serves on both the Historical Commission and the Historical Architectural Review Board. He took that position last year
Last year, yeah.
and stepped into the position that had been vacated by Gary Harning, had been in that place. By his position as city building official, he serves on that committee. We have gone previously through the formal process of appointing him, and we're doing that now. His term is actually up on the Historical Commission, but we're going to go ahead and, since he was not formally brought through the process when he replaced Gary Harning, we're going to go ahead and do both of his appointments for HARB and for Historical Commission.
Okay. Would you like to say anything?
Just happy to meet you folks, and
Yeah.
it's
Nice to meet you,
It's a
John.
pleasure
Thank
to
you
work
so
in the
much.
city. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for serving the city
Thank you.
in your official capacity and this capacity.
Well, then I'd like to make a motion to move this forward to our full council on March 10th. All in favor?
Second.
Thank you.
Aye. Thank you.
And then now we're going to move to Glenwood Sloan, nominated for appointment to the Public Art Advisory Board. So to make a motion until he, I'm not even sure if he's here. Is he? So, motion was on the floor.
Oh, second.
And I would like to move that then to full council, March 10th. All in favor?
Aye.
Jeff Tishner, nominated for appointment for the sign commission. If Jeff would like to come and speak to us. Come on up.
Hey, hello.
Please.
So, Jeff, tell us why you'd like to serve on the sign commission.
So I was asked to serve on the sign commission just because I have an interest in art, and I want to make sure that the integrity of the city is kept by signage and things like that that are put up. Oh, experience.
You're selling yourself short.
Sorry. Experience. I'm a freelance illustrator, graphic designer. I've done all kinds of art projects, and from murals to installation pieces. I've done billboards and signs that have appeared throughout the city.
Jeff, did you design the, is it true you designed the Zoe?
Yes.
logo?
Yes, I designed the city logo. Yes. Sorry.
That's good.
So I'd like to then make a motion to nominate the appointment then.
Second.
And also to move this to full council on March 10th. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
And let's see, I'd like to make a motion now to nominate Mark Stoner for the appointment of Community Relations Commission.
Hello. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
And Mark, if you'd like to enlighten us on the things you do with Human Relations.
Well, I've been involved with a lot of city organizations. One of the things that wasn't on, I'm also on the DID board. I've been involved with the commission since Lancaster City formed its commission. I was involved with city government at that time to help revise it, that was based on the city-county commission that was disbanded by the county. So I've been on the board since about 2003, and I was asked by the governance committee of the board if I'd consider being on the commission. I think the board is really running well. We've had Mr. Trump's being elected has gotten a lot of volunteers on the board. That's the one benefit I've seen in the last couple years. And so I'd like to serve on the commission, and I think one of my goals would be to help the commission and the board work a little bit more closely. Sometimes that's an issue.
Just a quick question. Maybe familiar, I don't know if you've actually spoken with David about the movie they're trying to put out to the college.
No, I haven't heard that.
Okay. I'll probably forward that then to you. And I thank you for serving, because it does take a lot to understand the disparity of diversity and how people are being so good on them and putting and they just throw words out without thinking before hurting people. So thank you so much for doing.
And I would just add, having the pleasure to serve with Mark on the board for the last 2 years. I'm really excited to see him come on as a commissioner. I think that's really important to fill out that role for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, do we have a motion and second there?
It is. So I'd like them to move this forward then to March 10th for full council. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry, what was the second on that?
I was.
She's second, please. And let me make a motion to the last person, which is Sam Wilsker, nominated for reappointment to the Noise Control Board. I don't know if he's here. I don't think we decided.
I think we decided not to invite him. Yes.
So,
Reappointment, we didn't think he needed to attend.
Yeah, so I would second that. Thank you.
and I'd like to then just move this board into March 10th then for full council. All in favor?
Aye.
And that's all I have, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Diaz. We move then to the Public Safety Committee. Councilor Garcia Molina.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today, we actually don't have any items for us to vote on, but we do have an update from the chief on city's marijuana ordinance, as well as the aggressive panhandling ordinance. So, Chief, if you don't mind. Sure.
So I'm actually going to do kind of a 2019 year in review, which is going to include marijuana ordinance and the panhandling ordinance. So some of our key accomplishments for 2019, we're continuing and throughout 2020. Policy review continues, and we're moving forward for accreditation with Pennsylvania Chiefs of Police Association. We reassigned one of our detectives to conduct background investigations full-time to help with our hiring shortage. Right now, by Wednesday, we'll have 11 vacant positions. We've created a community outreach unit that includes Sergeant Summerall, Dorsey Summerall, who supervises our school resource officers and team officer, Sergeant Morant, who's our community outreach sergeant, and then we hired in September a police social worker. And just to give you an idea of some of the work our social worker, Leilani Tron, has been doing since she was hired, she's had 86 proactive engagements where she's actually gone out and proactively met with members of the community, including our homeless population, to try and refer them to services. She's conducted referrals to social service agencies and actually 46 referrals from officers. So that our officers are actively using her to refer people to different services. And she's made 11 new referrals since she started in September. Usually what she's encountering is a lot of individuals are already receiving services where they flat refuse any services. And what she has done are those already receiving services, she gets them reconnected with those social service agencies. To include, she's accompanied some of these individuals to their mental health appointments to speak to their providers about ongoing symptoms, and she's made contact with services about medication management and ongoing counseling from what she has seen in her interactions with them. We've also began working with, we just started with the Second Chance program, which is put out with a partnership with Blueprints for Addiction Recovery. This is a law enforcement-led addiction diversion program. It kind of came about through the opioid crisis, but it involves addiction to all sorts of substances, including alcohol. So we've been training those officers. We've had individuals from the Second Chance program in throughout the month of January and February, training our officers, and this is a diversion program where it's a warm handoff. So if we encounter an individual that has, they're in possession of a small amount of drugs, they can turn those drugs over to the officer for destruction. We hold it as evidence to be destroyed, and then the officer calls a phone number, and a certified recovery specialist shows up where the officer is at to then take that individual for rehab. So it's something that's been ongoing in Elizabethtown, Northwest Regional Police, and I believe one other agency in the county. One of the things I'll hand out is a handout that we're using in some of the town halls that we've been doing. So this kind of gives talks about some of our key accomplishments, and it's a two-sided paper. It shows that some of the different numbers that we've been dealing with over 2019. So we've had 235 positive comments or officer commendations throughout 2019. We had 8 complaints against officers or our civilian employee staff that have been sustained and have led to discipline. And our discipline is anything from a counseling session with a supervisor up to and including termination. And we had 1 termination from these complaints. As you can see that number in the middle, we responded to more than 84,000 calls for service. That also includes attending court hearings and any proactive policing that our officers have done. We completed 150 body camera rollout in June of last year. We have more than 350 children involved in our police athletic league. We did 23 children or youth engagement events. That's painting with the police, reading to elementary school children, and reading at Lancaster County Public Library, just to name a few. We attended 19 neighborhood engagement events. We did 18 community education events, and we have 8 recruiting events. In addition to that, and I actually think I handed out the one page I was going to work off of, we just hired today, or he started today, is our police cadet. So we have new police cadet. He is a hack student. He'll graduate in December, and he'll be working with us as a cadet. And we have a second one that's in our hiring pipeline, who is a Millersville University student. So we have 4 budgeted positions for police cadet. And what's nice for us is we can use that as a recruiting tool for them to come on as a police officer, and they also get 5 extra points in our civil service exam. Yeah, that's one of them. There's another one flipping around somewhere. But his name is John Lugo. In addition to that, we're going to be holding our first ever police career open house for new Americans. We're doing that in conjunction with Church World Services, March 26th, at their offices. So we're going to profile all the different careers that we do have within the police department, including police officer. So that's a partnership we made with Church World Services through Matt Johnson and Sergeant Moran. For our homicides for 2019, we investigated 9 homicides. 2 of those were from the same incident, and 7 of those homicides were cleared by arrest, and 6 were cleared by arrest, and 1 was cleared through just no prosecution because there's an element of self-defense involved in it. We counted 294 or 95 use of force incidents involving arrests. But that also captures our verbal commands and officer presence. So if we take that out of the equation, the actual number of times we actually had to use physical force to make an arrest was 185 times. And 101 of those instances was what we consider soft empty hand control, which is joint manipulation or joint locks. So if you look at, we make about 4,000 to 5,000 arrests every year. We use force about 3.5% of the time that we made those arrests. Our recruitment and testing for 2019, again, we're still part of the county consortium. We had 319 people apply to take the test. We only had 207 show up on the day of testing. 169 passed the physical portion of the test, and 124 applicants passed written testing. This was also the first year that we did test prep partnership with the NAACP. We had 29 individuals in those classes. We're going to be doing that again this year. And finally, updates on our marijuana ordinance. So for 2019, we wrote a total of 105 citations under that ordinance. 88 of those citations were issued to men and 17 to women. And I believe President Smith-Waddell, you had asked if we could break that down by area of the city, and we were able to do that. So 45 of those citations were issued in the southeast, 33 in the southwest, 7 in the northeast, and 9 in the northwest, and then 2 in what we're calling the northwest extension. So that's Spinato's office.
Could you repeat that for me?
Sure. So the southeast were 45, southwest 33, northeast 7, northwest 9, and the northwest extension, which is the Park City area 2.
And Chief, to be clear, that is citations under the ordinance we passed, oh gosh, a little over, when was that?
3 years.
Versus from the State Controlled Substances Act, or?
Correct.
Okay.
And that's just the numbers for 2019.
Okay.
And we referred 3 juveniles to the youth aid panel under the citations. So marijuana charges, which is the State Controlled Substance Act, we had 45 total possession of small amount charges that were filed last year compared to the ordinance. And a breakdown of those, we had 41 men and 4 women charged. Again, 3 juveniles were referred to the youth aid panel. And areas of the city, southeast were 9, southwest 18, the northeast 9, and the northwest 6. Do you have any questions about those numbers before I move on?
So when it comes to referrals to the youth aid panel, who makes that decision and what's the process like?
So the county district attorney's office sets the parameters for what can be referred to the youth aid panel. That information is provided to the officers, and then the individual arresting officer makes that referral to the youth aid panel.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Not that I had on that matter.
And then as far as the panhandling ordinance, there were 33 citations issued last year. And the majority of those were over the warmer weather months.
Can you, Chief, refresh me, in 2018, the number of citations for the panhandling ordinance, do you know off the top of your head?
Not off the top of my head. It was right around the same number.
About even, okay, thank you.
Any other questions related to all the information I went over?
With the Blueprint program, considering that we respond to 84,000 calls, how are we managing the addition of this program to those calls?
So that's going to be within that 84,000 number. So it's just a matter of, quite frankly, our officers, if it's kind of like the possession of a small amount of marijuana.
Okay.
Even when I was a patrol officer 20-ish years ago, to take me off the street to do a possession of marijuana arrest, to do the paperwork involved, I would much rather, if that was the only charge we had, it was so much easier for me to destroy the drugs on the street and let the person walk.
Okay.
So I don't see this program being any additional work on the officer because other than marijuana, heroin or fentanyl and cocaine or PCP or methamphetamine, we're not going to destroy that on the street. We're actually going to take it in, log it in as evidence so it can be destroyed in the incinerator. So they have to do that paperwork anyway. The difference is they don't have to do any paperwork related to charging anyone. All they have to do is call that phone number for somebody to show up.
If someone were to choose not to participate in the Blueprints program, are we still dropping charges?
So if they agree, no. I would say if they agree to go with the Blueprints program, once we hand them off, there's no charges. If they don't agree to go into that program, then they're probably more likely going to be arrested for that possession charge. And then obviously any court-ordered, rehab is going to come from, probation or the courts or drug court.
The last question that I personally have, are we actively recruiting for the other police cadets?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's something we're, so Sergeant Moran and Sergeant Summerall, along with all of our SROs, are trying to get that information out through the school district in Lancaster. And they're actually going to be working towards more of having like a first responders club in the high school setting. And we're hoping that Officer Carlos Luciano he's at JP McCaskey, is going to be kind of spearheading that.
Okay.
And we're regularly talking about the cadet program. The chief and I were met with the members of the Black Student Union at JP McCaskey and talked about it there. And pretty much every opportunity. Those are paid positions. They're making $17 an hour, and that's in addition. Obviously they're going to school while they're doing that, so it's giving them a lot of opportunities to be working inside the police department while also going to school. And I think we're offering payment for credits. Is that also?
No, we're not doing any of that.
Okay, just the hourly rate.
Yeah, just the hourly rate. And then, we've opened it up to. It had been just for city residents only, but we opened it up to school district of Lancaster graduates, because we kind of looked at it, just because you live in Lancaster Township, you're still a city kid, you're going to city schools. And then we also opened it up to other colleges. It had been solely Hack, but then we knew we had city kids going to Millersville and even Albright, Alvernia. So we did have one of the young ladies at the Black Student Union. She asked if we consider Drexel or LaSalle. I said that might be a little far for you to drive to, for part-time employment. But any of the local area schools, we're definitely interested.
Can you jog my memory as to what the requirements are?
You just have to be a school district of Lancaster graduate is essentially the main requirement. And then you have to pass a background investigation because you're going to have access to our records management system and criminal justice information. So you do have to go through a background process. And that also helps us if they do become a police officer. They have to take the civil service exam because we are civil service. But their background is pretty much completely done. And then if they've been working for us for a year, 2 years, or 3 years, we have a pretty good employment history with them, and it should make the hiring process a lot smoother.
I personally don't have any other questions, but as I was talking to you earlier and just kind of opening it up to the public, I actually got to meet with Leilani, who's the public social worker, and the level of competency that she had, compassion, was inspiring. In the middle of our meeting, she actually had to cut it short because there was an officer in the field who needed her assistance. So it was nice to see kind of that warm handoff that was happening and going above and beyond. So it was really nice to see that we are investing in kind of this holistic approach and working as a team. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
No further questions? Questions from council? Questions from the public? Well, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Is that all you have, Councilor Garcia?
That's all I have.
Great. Sir, would you like to, in between committees, would you like to briefly introduce yourself to us?
Yes. Shall I come to the table? Or
Yes, please.
Come on up.
And good evening to you all. So, sorry I could not be with you at the top of the 6 o'clock hour. I am tethered to Amtrak these days, and they don't keep as quick a schedule as you do. My name is Linwood Sloan. I am a new resident to your community, new meaning that I have joined you since 2017. Before that time, I lived for 15 years in Harrisburg, serving the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, first as the Director of Cultural and Heritage Programs under Governor Rendell for the 8 years of his term, and then as the Pennsylvania Film Commissioner and the Director of the Film Tax Credit Office for Governor Corbett. I retired from that position to set up Mayor Papenfuss's Cultural and Heritage Tourism Program for the city of Harrisburg in the first year of the Papenfuss transition. And I have been recently reappointed to the Capital Preservation Commission by Governor Wolf. I am Governor Wolf's appointee to the Capital Preservation Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. You'll be happy but probably unsurprised to hear that Councilor Diaz moved and the Personnel Committee voted to move your appointment to the full council meeting next Tuesday across the hall. And certainly your qualifications for the Public Art Advisory Board are impeccable. So thank you for being here.
Well, I walk the city every day. Yeah. I live at Musser Park. I walk to Amtrak. So the landscape of Lancaster and the public art of Lancaster as a civic dialogue for its foot traffic is my passion and my advocacy. So I'm happy to join you.
I'm really excited to see what your perspective really brings to the table.
I'm really excited to listen. I think the first thing I can bring to the process is listening. So
that's right.
That's great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan.
Sorry about that. All right, and with that, I will turn it over to Councilor Arroyo for the Economic Development Committee.
Mr. President, I believe this was tabled for...
It was. That's my error for not announcing that this item had been pulled from the agenda. We will address that, as I said at the top of the meeting, in the public hearing next week. You didn't have anything else, Councilor Arroyo?
No, Mr. President.
All right. Councilor Craig has not joined us. I'm not sure what's happening there, but actually, Councilor Arroyo, would you be so kind as to chair the Community Planning Committee?
Yes, Mr. President. The Community Planning Committee has a few items on the agenda. The first is Administration Resolution number 13/2020, Sewage Planning Module for the Bontown Redevelopment Project. I'd like to invite Mr. Stephen Campbell, if he's here, to speak on this. Sorry.
This actually should be Douglas.
Douglas. Thank you. Never mind. I'd like to invite Mr. Douglas Smith.
I would have happily deferred, but glad to be at the table with you all. Good evening. So I have a memo here I'd like to pass out, which will help to explain what we're about to discuss for the next 3 items on the agenda. I'll wait till you all have a copy and then we can go through it. So the next 3 items are all sewage planning modules, and I'm going to kind of walk you through what that means exactly. Per the Pennsylvania Sewage Facilities Act, all municipalities must develop and implement a comprehensive official sewage management plan. otherwise known as an official plan or a base plan. That addresses present and future sewage disposal needs, in other words, our capacity for sewage planning. Municipalities are required to revise, unless exempt from revising, this official plan where new development is proposed. So Pennsylvania DEP reviews and approves these official plans, any subsequent revisions. These official plan revisions are known as sewer planning modules, and they are routine checks to determine if sufficient sewer capacity exists for the proposed land development project. The necessary forms are typically completed by the city's utility project manager, Brian Harner, myself, and the city clerk, Bernard Harris. Over the last 3 years, and since the North Pump Station upgrades in 2017, the DEP has allowed land developments in the city to be exempt from sewer planning modules. However, on November 18th of last year, DEP issued a letter to municipal officials announcing it would no longer exempt sewer planning modules in the city or its tributary municipalities because the city was not in compliance with the Clean Streams Law. I'm sure you're all familiar with combined sewer overflows, and this is a violation of the Clean Stream Laws, which we are working to correct, and is a long-term process. And the sewer planning exemptions do not apply when facilities are not in compliance, according to the DEP. So due to this recent change in policy, the city is now responsible for processing these official plan revisions for land developments that meet specific thresholds for increased sewer capacities. I'll say just a little bit more on that. So a project, if it requests capacity up to 800 gallons per day, it does not need sewer planning, but when it goes beyond that, that's where the requirement kicks in. It actually has to go a couple EDUs above that. So if it increases by up to 399 gallons per day above the allotted 800 gallons per day, then it's required to have sewer planning. Probably more than you ever wanted to know about sewer planning. So moving ahead, council will vote on resolutions to affirm that preliminary sewer capacity reviews have been performed so prospective development projects can continue to move forward with the standard subdivision and development review process. So this is very early in the process of these projects. It's mostly perfunctory in nature so that the development can proceed with some assurance that the city has utility capacity. Okay. Any questions about that?
Any questions from the committee? Councilor Ivo. As far as the different properties, is there anything specific to the different properties that we need to be aware of, or is it pretty much standard across the board?
So all of these are increasing above the allotted 800 gallons per day. So Bonton, as you know, is being demolished at Park City, and they're installing 2 restaurant pads. The restaurant pads are going to be using additional water and sewage from the city, so they're required to go through this planning process. 221 North Prince, this is the Anytime Fitness building. The floors above Anytime Fitness have been approved by the Zoning Hearing Board to have rooming units installed there, so there's going to be shared kitchen facilities and then efficiency units, essentially, that are being served by those shared facilities. It's called they're boarding rooms because they actually are smaller than our typical efficiency. So they're permitted in the central business district, but they had to receive a variance to increase up to 29. So 20 are permitted in the CB1. And then the second property next door to that, 227 North Prince, most people know is the Roberitos building. This is where there are some standard apartment efficiencies, 1 and 2 bedrooms that are going to be installed, and again the capacity is increasing because those upper floors have been underutilized for quite some time. And both of these will be submitting land development plans for review.
If I may, Councilor, just to add that this is so early in the process in any of this, because like in the instance of the Bonton, we don't exactly know what the restaurants will be. And so these are estimates that will move through a planning process. So there's a land development. In some cases, these don't come until after a zoning, like the Prince Street properties, but they will come to us before any of the details of the land development process or any other historical commission or HARB requirements. So this is like super early to basically give the developers a green light to begin to spend money essentially on the planning process. And there are additional checks and balances related to these development projects. And I say all this not in relation to these 3 specific projects, but just to say that there will be more projects that are going to come before council for consideration related to this. And it is really a yes or no. Is there capacity? Yes. Or if there is not capacity, no. And in most cases, there is capacity in our system for the additional development.
Thank you, Mayor. Anyone from the public have any questions? With that, I'll motion to move this to the council meeting for a vote.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And,
Just to be clear, was that all 3 super planning modules?
Really should I mention that it's...
Well, I was going to ask you the same question.
Yes.
And actually, I prefer for the sake of the minutes, we go through this and do individual resolutions. So that was for 13.
Correct.
And for 14?
So I'll motion to move resolution number 14, 2020 to the city council meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And 15.
And I'll motion for resolution number 15 to move to the next city council meeting as well.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. And for the next one?
So the next item regarding right-of-way dedication on Grofftown Road, I did bring a plan set with me if you'd like to see the situation, but happy to unroll that for you. In brief, Grofftown Road, there's the CH&E has a construction facility there where they house most of their operations, and they're going through they have gone through a land development process, which has been approved, recorded, and they're able to start the construction process. Through that process, we found out through the title search that the right-of-way, portion of the right-of-way in Grofftown Road had never been properly dedicated to the city. In other words, really, the public had no right to be using that portion of the road, even though it was being paved and managed as a city road. So we found that out. It was supposed to be recorded through a previous subdivision process, and it wasn't. So a condition of the land development approval was that they submit an ordinance to City Council for right-of-way dedication of that stretch of the road. So they are upgrading that portion of the road with curb and sidewalk where needed, and it's just, again, kind of perfunctory because it's already functioning as a public road. And I'll also mention that it is a connection that's been identified in our active transportation plan. So this goes by the McCaskey campus and dead ends right before it hits 30. And on the other side of 30 is the operations center, where there's been some trail development already. So the long-term goal is for there to be a tunnel underneath here. So CH&E was also required to install 5-foot sidewalk across the entire frontage of their property to help in the long-term development of this area as a trail.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any questions from the committee or council at large? From the public? Thank you, Mr. Smith. With that, I'll motion to move Administration Bill number 2 to the next City Council meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And that is all, Mr. President, for the Community Planning Committee.
Thank you. All right, we'll move then to the Public Works Committee. Councilor Soto.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is time to open the Public Works Committee meeting. We have 2 items on the agenda. Administration Resolution number 16, authorizing a grant application for the Milburn Park Playground renovations. And Administration Resolution number 17, authorizing a grant application for the Conestoga Pines Park Master Plan. At this time, who will be addressing these?
Mr. Campbell's here.
Mr. Campbell, could you please come forward, please?
Thank you. Welcome back.
Glad to be back.
Councilman Soto. I'm very happy to be working with you and look forward to work with the committee some more on a variety of public works projects. These two administrative resolutions, I'm going to couch them first as both of them being administrative resolutions, are the procedural aspect of being able to engage in a particular process for moving these two park playground, or one of them's a park playground, one of them's a park exploration study forward. It's a very positive way for us to engage with funds that, and allow us to match funds to be able to get work done. It's in fact a process that we've used a number of times before, notably with the Holly Point a couple of years ago, where in fact one of the partners we will be working with again on Milburn. So the first resolution is requesting Community Conservation Partnership Program, a C2P2, you start to hear that terminology more often, grant from the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, DCNR, to be used for the Milburn Park playground renovation. The goal there is to be able to identify playground equipment, have it designed and installed in that community in Southeast.
And if I could just add to this, this is a partnership also with the Pennsylvania Municipal League, which is going to be hosting their conference here. And as part of their conference, there's always a playground build that is done the day before the conference starts. And so municipal officials and staff from across the Commonwealth come to communities across the state and bring their work boots, and we provide them with the supplies that they need, and so we have volunteer labor for that day to actually do these park improvements. And Milburn Park is a little hard to find. I don't know if any of you know where this is, but it's kind of hidden behind Lime Street. And there is adjacent parking for the residents, but it is kind of like a backyard park. And so we're going to be focusing our efforts there on this day. And the same kind of thing, as Mr. Campbell mentioned, Holly Point Park was achieved in the same way. So literally DCNR sets aside some portion of funds every year for this conference for them to go around the state and basically plant a park, which is kind of a cool thing.
That's October this year.
That's 2021. Yeah, they're always working in a year ahead.
So that's the administrative resolution. Thank you very much for filling in the other details.
I have one quick question. Do we have an idea of what the dollar amount might be for that? What our goal is, or how much we think we
We
will
don't
get?
really know. We will be asking for 3 proposals, and we'll be taking the average of those proposals as the thing that sets the amount. And generally, these PA Municipal League and DCNR will do half of that, or up to half of that, and we'll do the other half.
Great, thank you.
Mayor, on Milburn renovations, what will all be encompassed in that renovation?
Pardon me?
What will all be encompassed in that renovation?
For the Milburn?
For the Milburn Park, yes.
It is primarily the playground, and whatever gets identified with the local community as their needs for play equipment. I believe it's 2 different age groups that the target is. It's toddlers and what you and I would call tweens. So it's very much the local community.
Will there be any landscaping and artwork into that area?
I believe, from what I'm told about how Holly Point went, there was landscaping included in that, but it was primarily the focus of the play equipment.
The play equipment, okay.
And there is not really anything at Milburn right now. There's some grills, there's some bench seating and some trash receptacles, but there's not really anything else.
Is that going to take care of all the parking on both sides? Well, actually, I think there's 3 sides where there's parking.
It will not affect any parking.
No, I meant, pave that also, is that all included? There's pretty.
But isn't some of that parking private property?
I don't know the answer to these questions, but we can find out for you.
Yeah, they are residents.
It's an old park, and there used to be some equipment there a long time ago, but as time goes on, things get destroyed, this can get replaced.
This would not necessarily constitute all future investment in that location.
Right.
But it is very much focused on the playgrounds.
Thank you. Any other questions from the council? Any other questions from the public? Well, at this time, I'd like to make a motion to move resolution number 16 to full council on the 10th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and administration resolution number 17.
This resolution is related to the Conestoga Pines area, the site at the waterworks. It's a resolution to the council requesting Community Conservation Partnership, C2P2 grant from the DCNR to be used for the Lancaster Waterworks and Conestoga Pines Master Site Development Plan. This is to be able to explore ways that the site, not only the pool, but the open areas around the site can be made more accessible to the public. In that particular area, we have either just acquired or are in the process of acquiring a piece of property that will help us fully realize the heritage trail in that area, and therefore there's new possibilities for a connector along the heritage trail to this piece of land. That site also has the old waterworks facility, which at present is currently used as for weddings or for other special events. So it's a way of exploring the possibility of using that land and making it more accessible to the public.
How much money will be applied for?
Unfortunately, on this one, I'm not sure how much money we're looking for either. What I have been told is, again, there's a scope of work. This is still early in the process. We did not want to miss the window of getting an application in. But we're about to know within the next 2 to 4 weeks what the likely cost would be. That would be included in the grant request.
Just forward that information, and then I'll forward on to the rest.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And there will be matching funds along with that, will they not?
That is correct. It
Okay.
operates in a similar manner to the other administrative resolution.
Any questions from the committee?
Is that the one near where the pool is? There's a
Yes.
Yes.
recreation there?
Yes.
That is correct.
Thanks.
Any questions from the council? Rest of the council? Any questions from the public? Okay, then I'll make a motion to move the resolution number 7, administration resolution number 17 to full council on the 10th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think that concludes the public works.
Thank you, Councilor Soto. And then we have Finance Committee, Councilor Bakay.
Thank you.
Oh.
I'm sorry, can I make just one note? After listening to that conversation, I realized that bill number 220, the right-of-way dedication, should be sent to the meeting on the 24th because of advertising requirements. So we need 7 days before the next meeting, so we'll have to, the soonest I think it could go to council will be the 24th. I didn't hear whether you said the 10th or the 24th for moving that ahead. The right-of-way
We need
dedication.
7 days after the first reading. So we can do the first reading, and then we have 7 days in order to, I mean, unless there's some other stipulation.
No, okay,
Two readings.
there are 2 readings, okay, got you, then that works, okay, thank you.
Just to be clear, we are then fine to proceed?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I thought the first ad had to appear no less than 7 days, no more than 30. So if it were
7
going
days
to,
before the second reading, before adoption.
okay.
So we
Oh,
have.
I see, yes. So 2 reads, okay, gotcha. Just want to make sure we're abiding by those, because of our discussion earlier today.
Yes.
Sorry.
We appreciate your diligence. Better safe than sorry. All right. Anybody else? All right, Councilor Bakay.
Terrific, thank you. Finance Committee has 2 items on the agenda tonight. Patrick's already here. I will let him go ahead and address this on resolution number 10, 2020. Patrick. Mr. Hawkins?
And Susanna's going to jump up here in case I mess anything up. Okay, so.
I told her to go.
Thanks for having my back, Chris, I appreciate it. Okay, so, just like Mr. Campbell explained, sort of process on the last two resolutions that you saw, these are sort of another step in the RCAP redevelopment capital assistance program, which for whatever reason everybody refers to as RCAP. Two separate resolutions. The first one is for the fire station project, and the fire station project is really both stations together because there was one application, one RCAP application for that. You know, we received the indication that we had an initial award of $500,000 for that project, and I'm going to say initial award because we are pursuing additional RCAP dollars for that project, but we have an initial award of $500,000. We have to officially accept that award, and then there is a larger application and business plan that has to be submitted to the Commonwealth to actually get the final award, get a grant contract, and then be able to begin the process to draw down funds on the grant. So that's what the first resolution does, and the second one has a little bit longer explanation, so I thought maybe you want to just handle that one alone and then go on to the next one.
Absolutely. Any questions from any other member of the committee on resolution number 10 specifically?
I just have one, is this grant above and beyond what we've already applied for the fire stations?
Well, we, in 2019, the original grant application was for $4 million. We received $500,000 of that $4 million request. We are continuing to pursue additional RCAP funding for this project, and we've done that, well, pretty much since about a day or two after the initial $500,000 award. The projects themselves together are a little over $12 million. As you know, we have we did the 2019 bank note for $9 million. We have $500,000 from the RCAP project, or from the RCAP grant. We have a reserve of $3 million from the general fund reserve that we set aside as part of the grant requirement. But we want to pursue additional RCAP dollars because we think it's extraordinarily worthy project.
Most definitely.
So is this a second application? Is this an application for a second RCAP?
This is just approving.
Yeah, this is accepting the initial grant and allowing us to move forward with doing the full application of the business plan that's required.
Questions from the rest of council? In the public? Great, and I make a motion that we move administrative resolution number 10, 2020 to full council meeting on March 10th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And number 11.
Okay, this one involves a little bit more discussion. So one thing I want to point out is that, so this $500,000 RCAP grant for Carlton Park actually began as an award for housing-related work in the Soe neighborhood. That was, after review by LHOP and the state and city folks, it was determined that the project itself really was not going to work well within the requirements of the RCAP program. So that original grant through that LHOP program and with the work of Soe and city staff was approved basically to be reapplied to the Carlton Park project as opposed to the LHOP and Lancaster Equity Program. So that's that second, or I'm sorry, the third whereas clause there that talks about LHOP and Lancaster Equity, that we now serve as the sponsor and that the project that the funds are going to go toward is the Carlton Park renovation. This resolution does what the prior one does, which is accept the grant award itself. But there are two other things that we need to resolve with this resolution. We have gone through, how many drafts have we had on this resolution, Susanna? 10, 12, Bernie? We've been Pepper and Bernie with a whole bunch of different versions of this. And the reason for that is there are two other requirements that we have with RCAP. One is that we have to show the Commonwealth that we have sufficient funds available to perform the entire project, complete the entire project before we draw down a dime of the RCAP funding. To do that, we have on other projects, we have had to do a line of credit to show that we have the cash flow to manage the project. In this case, what we're doing is we're saying that we have sufficient general fund reserves to be able to cash flow the project before we draw down any of the $500,000 RCAP dollars. The reality is that the first application for RCAP dollars might take a couple of months. After that, it might take a couple of weeks. So the reality is the cash flow on this is not very difficult to pull off. This is $500,000 of a more than $3 million project, so it's really not a huge chunk of the project itself, but we have to satisfy that requirement of the Commonwealth. And then the second thing is that we also have to, there are contingency allowances in the budget itself. So the contract project with the contractor is about $3.2 million. RCAP requires a reasonable contingency, which in this case, our RCAP consultant has said $100,000 is a reasonable amount for that contingency. This project also involves stormwater management 2018 bond funds, general fund bond funds, contributions from the Gunterberg Foundation through Carol Colton, and a DCNR grant for parks. So there are a bunch of different sources that are going through to combine for all this. So we're both having to satisfy the cash flow requirement for the project, and we're also having to set aside some funds for contingency above and beyond that. And part of that cash flow is also cash flowing the DCNR grant, which is
$300,000.
I've got to flip the page here. $300,000. So, if we actually have to dip into any of those contingency funds, we will need to come back to City Council for approval to either increase the general fund, bond fund portion of the project, because right now we're maxing out the bond fund portion that Council's already approved, or we would want to come back and do like a supplemental appropriation to use funds from the general fund reserve. All this resolution is doing is basically satisfying the Commonwealth's requirements, but we would have to come back for separate council approval if we actually need to spend any of those contingency dollars. So we're trying to do three different things with one resolution, and we got the final sign off on this version of the resolution at, about 4 o'clock this afternoon. Did I miss anything?
That was really well done.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, just to add to this, this has been a long journey with this $500,000. It originally, each of these grants has a geographic focus area, which in this case was the Southwest, and it was initially through Lancaster Equity and LHOP, and it was to be a housing-oriented project to develop more affordable housing, given the partners. That makes sense. The challenge was that the way that this was structured, the way that the program was structured that LHOP was going to be using this funds for was not copacetic with RCAP and the way that they do things. And so Ray D'Agostino, who is then the executive director at LHOP, and I went to Harrisburg. We met with the staff, we explained to them the problem, and we got their blessing to reorient these funds to a project that was in the same geographic area, that was still affiliated with SOE, but that we could move these monies to support park improvements rather than the housing. The good news is that the housing efforts were able to be realized through some other funding streams, so there was not, it wasn't a negative. It just took a long time, and that we're still dealing with this. When did this start? 2 years. It's been 2 years. So we're actually now, with the hopefully passage of this, we're ready to move on to the next step. And as you know, Culleton Park is now a construction zone.
Dirt is moving.
Yeah, so things are moving over there.
Where's that park located again?
Behind the Water Street Rescue Mission, right along Water Street.
Farnham Park, Pete.
Farnham, why don't we just call it Farnham Park?
Or for people of a certain age, Pond Field.
Pond Field. You went there, didn't you?
People of a certain age. It's not us, Jeannie.
People with this stuff.
Any questions from the committee?
Yes, Patrick, I have a question. How much is in the reserve that's going toward this?
Well, so the general fund reserve at the end of 2018 was $13.8 million. At the end of 2019, it will be more than that. I'm not quite ready to give you that number yet, but we're like a couple weeks away from being able to provide you with that number. But all we're doing with this, we're not actually saying that we're going to use any of those reserves for the actual project. We have to prove to the Commonwealth that we have the funds available to cash flow the project before we draw down the RCAP dollars. So we're not actually, if we need to come back to, or if we need to spend any of the reserve dollars on the park project, we'd have to come back to City Council for separate approval.
This renovation, Patrick, will also include the baseball field, the backdrops, the concession stands.
It is everything in the current area of the park. The pool to be redone as a splash pool, a little bit of an expansion of the pavilion area. There are some stormwater management components, mostly toward the Water Street side, and also down towards Conestoga Street, sort of in that corner at Conestoga and Water, there's a stormwater component. Redo of the two basketball courts that are there, and I think moving them up a little bit closer to Farnham Street. And a walkway, staircase and a walkway down from Fremont Street into the park.
Will that also include the upgrading of the fencing, the property fencing lines?
Yes. And this is being called Phase 1 of the park. Phase 2 would be the Rostalski property that we purchased last year. The aluminum building that's behind the backstop.
Right.
That's Phase 2, and we don't have final plans or
money
for that.
Well, I understand, I was just wondering, because that fencing is, it's no neighborhood of mine. It was destroyed pretty much.
There is we've put out the drawing that was done for recent neighborhood meetings. For the last thing was presented at a meeting several weeks ago, I think. The last OE board meeting, okay. And the Friends of Culleton Park Facebook page has it up as their photo, so you can see it.
Any questions from the rest of council?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Will there be any additional road work, like in that area, since there is a lot of construction going
On Water Street, Strawberry Street, Farnham?
Yep, I mean, some of the people have been still commenting that around that area, they're still having a lot of potholes and things that need to be
Conestoga
addressed.
Street, I think from, right? I think Conestoga Street is on the
2020 paving list.
2020 paving list because of all the work that's been done along there.
Yeah, we can confirm that with you.
Okay,
Counselor.
thanks.
And obviously, it's also just a block away from my favorite, which is Prince Street, which cannot get done
Prince Street.
soon enough.
That's all I hear about every day.
Oh,
That's
me
on,
too.
That's on another government entity's paving list for 2020.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping it gets done in 2020. Yeah, I've been making inquiries and asking UGI not to wait until they do all of Prince Street, but that there's a sizable portion of South Prince Street that can get repaved and that they would just do it.
Quick question, is the park going to be inaccessible for the entirety of the summer?
I think till November.
Yes,
Is that
it
right,
will be.
Steve?
It's one season without the park.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which I believe is a common practice in all the playgrounds that we have worked on.
Yeah, I mean, we do try to get to coordinate as much as possible with the rec commission in advance, and in this case also the Boys and Girls Club, because they do a lot of programming in the park, because their clubhouse is just down the street. So that's the story.
There are a lot of softball games that are going to take place tomorrow. So.
Just actually mentioned, so Jeff and I are on the SOE board together, and he mentioned that the pool will be open for the summer.
Yeah.
Good.